kick it off. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I think we have a really good turnout. Not surprising. I think this is going to be a really interesting talk today from Pauline Yang on piano and public diplomacy. Dreams and passions inspire cultural diplomacy. So I think that, again, this is something that's very close to all of our hearts, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from Pauline. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Aaron Frankie. I am the membership coordinator for the Rising Professionals, the new category for the Public Diplomacy Council. So happy to have you here and happy to have such a great speaker. And so now I'll turn it over to Dr. Sherry Mueller.
Let me echo Aaron's welcome to each and every one of you in this room, including Pauline's mom in Taiwan and some of her piano teachers. We're delighted to have you all and to have this opportunity. I've been lucky enough to know Pauline for 4 years because of our Fletcher connection that I know many of you have. I want to say a special welcome to Len Valdega, who is one of our senior colleagues who's joining today. And for those of you who aren't on his listserv, let us know if you would like to be, and we will make that happen. And I also want to take a serious moment here to dedicate this program to the memory and the legacy of Hans Tom Tuck, one of the original founders of the Public Diplomacy Council, who passed away a few months ago. Tom was a master in using music in his public diplomacy work as a distinguished foreign service officer. Just want to share that after Pauline's presentation, she will move directly into 10 minutes of Q&A. And she's also promised after the breakout sessions, for those of you who haven't had your questions answered yet, she will stay for 15 minutes, make sure that we answer any questions that are hovering out there. I want to say a thank you to Olivia Chavez. She's our tech host today, who will be putting us into our breakout rooms. She also does wonderful work as the Public Diplomacy Council Graduate Fellow. Special thanks to our moderators, Hella Dale, Jim Kelman, Peter Kovach, Marilyn Sachs-McMillan, Mark Rebstock, Mike Schneider, Dan Whitman. I'm asking our moderators, and in fact, each of them in the breakout sessions, which will be about 20 minutes, they will ask each of you in their rooms to describe a cultural diplomacy activity you orchestrated or you witnessed that was particularly superb. And if you could just have a discussion about why was it successful, then we'll ask the moderators or the reporters in each room, Nicole Mular, Sana Udin, Jonathan Wang, Jeffrey Simmons, Danny Prouty, and Aaron Frankie, if you would be prepared to just record the favorite of your room and share it with the plenary session right after the breakout session. So on that note, want to thank all of our reporters and moderators in advance and hand the microphone off to Jeffrey Simmons, who's a rising professional member of the PDC and a Pickering Fellow, who will do the honors of introducing Pauline. Jeffrey, over to you.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Simmons. I am a rising professional and a 2019 Ringo Fellow, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the Public Diplomacy Rising Professional, Pauline Yang, this afternoon. I had the opportunity to speak with Pauline about our shared love of music diplomacy this spring and can personally attest to her strong passion for music, service, and public diplomacy. So you're all in for a treat. Pauline Yang began her piano studies at the age of 5 and won her first international competition at the age of 7 in Washington, D.C. In March of 1998, at the age of 11, Miss Yang made both her Philadelphia Orchestra debut, as well as her solo recital debut at Carnegie Hall. And the same year, Miss Yang entered the Juilliard School, where she won both the pre-college's concerto and scholarship competitions in her first year. She has since studied with Lee Kum-Sing in Vancouver, Susan Starr in Philadelphia, and John Perry in Los Angeles. Miss Yang is on the faculty of Toby and Itzhak Perlman's Perlman Music Program in Florida and Israel. Her solo and chamber music appearances have taken her throughout North and South America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. She has served as a volunteer artist at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, Massachusetts General Hospital in music for food. During her undergraduate studies at the University of Southern California, she was a double major in piano performance and political science. Ms. Yang was also one of Glamour Magazine's 2008 Top 10 College Women of the Year. She also has master's degrees in piano performance from USC and in international relations from Tufts University's Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, where she wrote her thesis on the roles of music at the White House and United States dinners. She has performed concerts and conducted public diplomacy events for U.S. Embassy Tokyo, U.S. Embassy Addis Ababa, U.S. Embassy Portugal, and the U.S. Mission to the African Union. In 2019, Ms. Yang performed at the 75th anniversary of the Bretton Woods Conference at the New Hampshire Resort, where the historic agreement was signed. While there, she played on the 1882 Steinway piano that Vladimir Horowitz played on when he stayed there. She also signed a contract for a solo U.S. concert tour for 2020 to 2021 that has been postponed to 2022 to 2023. And just 2 weeks ago, Pauline had a virtual talk with the public affairs section at U.S. Embassy Addis Ababa, where she spoke with 25 Ethiopian high school students, some of which had attended her programs from 2017. Through her music and outreach, Pauline remains dedicated to building ties and strengthening international relationships between the U.S. and other nations. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to present Ms. Pauline Yang.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction. And thank you, Sherry, for having me speak to everyone today. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. I do feel really lucky to have had the experiences that I've gotten to have in both my music career and in what led to these public diplomacy trips. And the one word that keeps coming to mind when I think about and reflect upon these trips is surreal, because I really dreamed about this for years and never thought that it would actually come true. But not only has my dream come true of getting to do these public diplomacy trips for our US embassies, but I have found time and time again that real life has turned out to be even better than my wildest dreams. And for that, I have so many people to thank, many of whom are on this call. So I will talk a little bit about what led to these trips, and then I'll talk about what I actually do on these trips, because those seem to be the two most frequently asked questions I get about these PD trips. So one of the things that led to my interest in this was that because I was fortunate enough to start traveling internationally for concerts from the age of 11, I really got a lot of exposure internationally from that young age, and I developed a strong curiosity and passion for international relations, diplomacy, culture, and learning how other people live in different countries. And then when I was 13, one of my piano teachers, who I think is on the call, told me that he thought that I should also look into a way to bridge music and diplomacy. And I dreamt about it for years, but I wasn't really sure yet how I could go about doing that. I often think that I'm living in the wrong era, because I think my dream job would have been to be a cultural attaché from decades past. I think now the role of a cultural affairs officer is a little bit different from what cultural attachés used to do. But in any case, I still wanted to look into pursuing a path that could combine my passions, both personally and professionally. So that was one part that led to this interest. The other big part was Michelle Kwan. So she is known to all as a very decorated figure skater. She has been one of my role models ever since I was 6 years old. Sorry, let me go to my slides. So here, I had followed her career ever since I was a child, and was just fascinated by her, with 9 national US titles, 5 world titles, 2 Olympic medals, and just one of the most lovely people I've ever met. So I've gotten to meet her on several occasions because her dad has actually become a mentor to me over the years. And so here are some of my favorite pictures with Michelle. And I mention her because in 2006, she was asked by Condoleezza Rice to be, or named rather, to be our first US public diplomacy envoy. And I remember her dad telling me about what she would be doing on these trips, and I was just fascinated. her dad would also update me on these trips as they would happen. And I was also following very closely in the news because I'm so interested in this field, but also because it was her, my longtime role model. And so over the years, she did 6 trips as her position in this role. So she did trips to China, Russia, Argentina, Ukraine, South Korea, and Singapore. And so on these trips, she did a combination of different types of public diplomacy events, and I was just trying to follow everything that I could to learn what she was doing. And I remember her dad telling me that I should look into doing this as well, but using music instead of through sports. And I thought that that was such a great idea, but I was asking him, but how? How am I supposed to do that? Of course, I would love to. But I just bookmarked the idea in my mind, and then I just kept working towards combining my, my 2 areas of interest, and then eventually it would start to happen, and I'll talk about how. So fast forward many years, Michelle went to the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, where she got her master's, and then I also ended up going there from 2013 to 2015. In my second year there, the State Department's diplomat in residence for the New England region, which is based at Fletcher, lucky for me, happened to be Ambassador Mary Beth Leonard, who I believe some of you on this call might know, and I believe she might be on this call as well. She was someone who I also, or is still someone who I look up to greatly, and we also formed a deep bond over our love of music, since she's a great flautist as well. And I got to learn a lot from her, and am continuing to learn a lot from her. I remember in 2015 in April, I was heading off to Japan, even though it was in the middle of a semester, and I was going to be there for about a week, and I had 1 free day in Tokyo. And so I asked Ambassador Leonard if there would be any chance, she thought, if I could be connected to the then cultural affairs officer there, so that I could see if I could potentially shadow him or her for the 1 day. I do love sightseeing as well, but on that 1 day, I really just wanted to get to shadow a cultural affairs officer at an embassy. And I talked to her about this, and she was so generous about it. She said, I think we can do better than that. Would you like to do a program for our embassy there? And so, of course, my first immediate thought was an enthusiastic yes. Of course, that's been what I've been dreaming about, and I hadn't even thought about that in that context when I would be visiting the embassy for that day. But then my immediate next thought was, oh no, but what do I actually do? So I had been following Michelle's trips, of course, over the years, but when I was given this opportunity, I was really nervous first, but then got a lot of help through the process. So she gave me some great advice. I also talked to Ambassador Swanee Hunt, who was one of my professors in grad school. She's a former U.S. ambassador to Austria, and she had been doing a lot of cultural and arts programs in her career. And then the embassy in Tokyo was extremely helpful as well. And you'll see very soon what kind of programs we built for that 1 day. So we had a lot of meetings, of course, beforehand over the phone, but then once I got there, then we had some detailed meetings to go over my itinerary. And then this was a flyer that the embassy put out to students for a concert/workshop/lecture that they had me do at the embassy. This is a photo of a lot of the students who were mostly in high school and college. They're Japanese students who already have long-standing interest in foreign affairs and had been regularly attending U.S. Embassy events. And so I did a talk for them, and you'll see more pictures of that shortly. I did a bit of a short concert, and then a Q&A, of course, and then a lecture which was on the role of music in U.S. cultural diplomacy. And then combined with the lecture was also a workshop where the embassy had me talk to the students about different potential ideas, similar to what we're doing today in the breakout rooms. And then embassy staff would give feedback to these students about their ideas for what could be done in the field. And so these are the students then presenting their project ideas. So we had great fun through all of this. And then on that same day, I had a concert at the Minister Counselor's residence. The Minister Counselor for Public Affairs, Margot Carrington, who I believe some of you might know. And I did a solo recital, and then at the end, I also did a quick chamber music piece with a Japanese singer, as well as her husband, who plays the Japanese flute. And that was a really nice way to get to meet some of the locals. And here's a photo with them after the concert, and then to also learn some more about Japanese music as well. This is another photo with Margot and her husband. And then this was a dessert reception that the Minister Counselor hosted in my honor, which was lovely because I got to meet a lot of the audience members. And these were mostly scholars in different fields who are interested in culture between Japan and the United States. And then that one trip really made me realize how much I do love getting to do this type of visit for an embassy. And so I just dreamed of getting to do another, but without thinking that it might actually be possible. Fast forward a few more years, in 2017, Ambassador Leonard, she was a former ambassador to Mali, but then she became ambassador to the African Union, and is currently our ambassador to Nigeria, actually. So if she's tuning in, she's in Abuja. And she invited me to do a public diplomacy trip for U.S. Embassy Addis Ababa and the mission to the African Union. And I'll be keeping this card forever. This was extremely meaningful for me, and it turned out to be a life-changing trip. This was an extremely packed schedule. Every day was filled with a lot of great public diplomacy events that the embassy and the mission helped me put together. And the first of the events was a radio interview with EBC, the Ethiopian Broadcasting Corporation. And they had me talk about the roles of music in U.S. cultural diplomacy, and then a little bit about the concerts that I would be performing in Ethiopia. This was a subsequent radio interview for Afro FM, which targets mostly a different demographic. And then this was another radio interview for Real Talk Radio USA, and this is mostly geared towards American expats in Ethiopia. Then I did what they call a coffee conversation at the embassy with students who were interested in studying in the United States. And so I talked to them about my own experiences of getting to do a double major, for example, which is not so common in other countries, and how in the United States it's not only possible, but it's even very much encouraged in a lot of schools, particularly at my university, my undergraduate alma mater, USC. And then this was a different talk with a different group of students who are also interested in studying in the United States. So there's a lot of interest in that. So I'm glad that the embassies have been putting on these events to help answer questions for the students. This is part of my presentation there. And then I saw these concert posters in various spaces around Addis, which was really nice to see. And my favorite part of the poster is that I got to perform with Ambassador Leonard, and you'll see some photos right here. So I did a bit of a solo performance, and then also got to perform with her, which is always an honor. And then here I'm going to play just a short clip from that concert. This is The Graceful Ghost Rag by William Bolcom. So at all of my embassy trips, I always include at least one piece by an American composer. And this one has been pretty popular with audiences. Okay, and then, oh, sorry. And then this was after the concert, and it was lovely to get to meet a lot of people in the community. For example, here with the ambassador and myself is Girma. I think his name is pronounced Ifeshiwa, who's a really famous pianist from Ethiopia. And then I got to meet some children who were apparently inspired during the concert. That's always one of my favorite parts after any concert, but particularly on these trips to different countries where I get to meet with the children and hopefully have inspired them. One of my other public diplomacy events was this masterclass that I did. And this actually was one of the scarier experiences for me, not because it was a masterclass, but because it was actually at a jazz school of music. And I don't play jazz, and but the embassy had wanted me to do this masterclass because there had been an expressed interest from the school, and the pianists wanted to hear from me. And I begged to do a classical one instead, but the classical conservatory was actually on holiday during that time. And so I eventually still made it work. I did not talk about improvisation because I don't know anything about that, but I worked with them on aspects of piano playing and of their repertoire that I could help them with. And so here is a picture of them setting up some of the keyboards, and then a photo of one of the 4 students who I got to work with. This was a photo from after the master class, and there were a lot of great questions from that session. It was extremely heartwarming for me to see that there is that much interest in learning an instrument there. Not all of these are pianists. Many of them play different instruments and or sing. And then we had a private concert at Ambassador Leonard's residence. And this was also a really memorable moment for me because this concert, in addition to some of my solo performances and getting to perform with her again, this also included a program that involved other musicians who were in the huge diplomatic corps in Addis. And I remember seeing the guest list for this event, and it had been 73 ambassadors and a few dozen officials from the UN and the African Union. And I remember turning to Ambassador Leonard and saying that I was so flattered that she invited all these very distinguished people, but that I was also very scared to see a guest list like that. And she said, "Oh, don't worry, we're just among friends." And I was thinking, yes, for you. But she then introduced me to so many of her friends, and I've been very grateful for that. Here's a photo of us performing. And then speaking of one of her friends, this was our immediate past ambassador to Ethiopia. And he had just arrived to Ethiopia for his post during my visit. And then, of course, I get some exposure to the host country's cultures as well when I'm doing these trips. And so this was from a night at Yod Abyssinia, which is a famous place in Addis, known for not only Ethiopian food, but also Ethiopian dancing and music. And so here is my attempt at dancing. There is no video of this. And then after that very life-changing trip, I thought, my dreams have come true. I don't think that there will be another chance to get to do this. This has already been better than what I dreamt of. But then the following year, a friend of mine, Meg Young, who also might be joining the call today, a friend from USC who was the Assistant Public Affairs Officer at Embassy Lisbon in 2018, was working with the embassy along with the Terra Sem Sombra Festival to put together some programs where the U.S. would be the host, would be the partner country of the festival that year. And so they happened to be looking for an American pianist for the festival, so hence why the festival approached the embassy. And then Meg happened to remember that I had done some public diplomacy trips in the past at this point, and so then she reached out and asked if I would be willing to do a trip for our embassy in Portugal. And of course, it was an automatic yes. I loved doing these, and so we got right to work to plan another very extensive and intense itinerary. So here is a photo of one of the staff members from the public affairs section in Lisbon going over the schedule with me, and I have continuously really appreciated all the effort that the embassy staff have put in to help make me feel comfortable in all these settings, and then to also let me know everything that would be going on in terms of who would be invited to these events, and then also what they would like me to talk about, and what would be helpful for my target audience. This was one of the many times that I got to practice at the ambassador's residence in Lisbon. The ambassador and his wife were very generous to open up their home and this piano to let me practice whenever there were free moments in my busy schedule. This was the first of the public concerts that I gave. This was in Cascais, a seaside resort town just outside of Lisbon, and this was at the Municipal Theater there. The embassy also had me do a short concert and a Q&A session with conservatory students in Lisbon, and as I said, it's always fun to meet students in these places. This is also one of those mementos that I'll be keeping forever. It's really small, but it says hosted by the U.S. Ambassador to Portugal, George E. Glass and Mrs. Mary Glass, and they hosted a private concert for me at their residence for their guests. And here's the ambassador making introductions, and then a photo from the performance. I'll play a short clip from that performance. Okay, and then this is from after the performance, and I also got to meet a lot of very interesting people who were in attendance that evening. I know that some people seem to think that diplomatic receptions are stuffy sometimes, but I personally love them, so I'm just having the greatest time. And then here in the upper right is a photo with Meg Young, actually, who was the reason who I even was able to do this trip. Now, this was the scariest moment for me in all of my public diplomacy trips combined. So I had seen in my itinerary that I would be doing a radio interview, which was fine. But I was told that the interviewer would be interviewing me in Italian. And I do speak Italian, but I didn't think that I would be able to do this in a live radio interview. And I begged and begged the embassy to have the interview be in where I could respond in English, and then here one of the embassy staff from the press section could then hopefully translate my responses. And they tried, but the radio station really, really wanted me to answer in Italian. So the interview actually ended up being where the radio host asked questions in Portuguese, and then the press secretary translated to me in English, and then I had to respond in Italian. And for me, this was by far the most nerve-wracking moment. It was 30 minutes. Luckily, I wasn't talking the entire time. The festival director was also there with me, but it was extremely scary, and I was so sure that all the radio listeners would be hearing my heart beating against that microphone right there. So here, this is not to show my Italian, but this is just to show how confused I looked for half the time as this process was going on when he was asking the questions, and then the press secretary was having to translate everything for me.
O que lhe peço, Pauline Yang, é que nos diga o programa, os compositores que escolheu, para além de Granados, roteiro de sentimentos, a very emotional way, imagino, roteiro emocional dos seus compositores prediletos. Traçar programa, como é que começa e como é que acaba o programa? Vamos lá, roteiro, os seus programas, os seus compositores, Pauline Yang.
And then I go on to speak for a bit. But the best part was this part.
E agora, Pauline Yang, rendemos-nos a esta pianista que toca assim uma das canções sem palavras de Felix Mendelssohn. Já está! It's done!
Right.
Okay.
So that moment of relief I thought would never come, but then that actually made me realize that I felt much more comfortable playing concerts rather than doing an interview in a language that I'm not as comfortable in. And then, sorry, I'm not very good at controlling this.
E agora, Pauline Yang.
Oh, and then that same evening, then there was a big concert at the National Palace of Cluj in Sintra. And before they opened up the hall to the audience, I got to have some time to just explore the palace grounds by myself. And I felt like a princess for a few minutes. It was lovely. And then this was the throne room, which is where state dinners are still sometimes held in Lisbon. And I'm fascinated by palaces and castles. So it was really an honor to play here. Here are some more photos from that performance. It was also one of the best Steinways I've ever performed on in my life. So it was quite a dream to get to do this. Here are some more photos. And then I'll play a short clip from that performance. And in the very beginning, you'll see in the second row, there's this little girl who's her eyes just light up as soon as the first three notes are played in this Bach cantata transcription. It's adorable. So see if you can spot her. She's right there. And I think I might have to go on because I want to make sure I get to the remaining slides. So here are some photos from after the performance. On the left is the mayor of Sintra. And then in the middle is that little girl who said that she was very inspired. And that's what this is all about for me, to inspire others just like others have inspired me. And then to the right, that is a former minister of culture of Portugal who's a fellow pianist. And then a venue that I never thought that I would have a chance to play in was an olive oil factory. So the festival had actually had this great idea to set this up, and it was really interesting to see how the sound would turn out, and it actually ended up being quite good because of all the surfaces where the sound bounces off. And this ended up actually not even being enough chairs. A lot of people, a lot more people showed up than we had expected. And so there were a lot of people sitting on the floor all the way in the back. And the National Opera of Portugal's lighting director was hired to do the lighting for that evening. And I think it just looked spectacular. I thought they did such a great job with that. Here, this is a video that the festival put together, which I really like. I might not be able to do the whole thing, but I'll just show you a little bit of it. And then the video goes on to show a lot of other events that took place during my visit to the countryside in Ferreira de Alentejo in Portugal. I think I'll skip this Liszt video for now because I want to make sure that I get to this other part of that trip. So this was after the concert, meeting with a lot more city, regional, and government officials, and then meeting with some more children who I hopefully inspired. And this was a biodiversity component of that very unique festival that combined music and biodiversity for the way that they're doing cultural outreach and cultural diplomacy. This was one of the most memorable moments for me because what's going on here is a Cant Alentejano group of singers. They were basically singing in my honor. And Cant Alentejano is one of the two designated types of intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO in Portugal, with the other being the more well-known fado. And the mayor of Ferreira de Alentejo had helped arrange this for me, to my surprise. And he said that even in all his years as mayor, they had never done this for him. So he said that it was a great honor. And so they're surrounding me as they sing. And then I'll show you a clip from that so you can see and hear how powerful it is. And then here, there's more of it going on. I think I might skip this for now. Oh, sorry. Okay, and then, oh, yikes. Okay, and then so subsequent trips, I got to go back to Ethiopia to visit Ambassador Leonard the following year, and then she took me on a wonderful trip to Harar, where we got to visit how the locals lived there, and then we went to feed the hyenas, which is a popular tradition there. And then I also got to do a repeat trip to Embassy Tokyo. This is at the ambassador's residence, this gorgeous and historic room. This is where Emperor Hirohito actually went to meet General Douglas MacArthur after World War II, so a lot of history there. And also this Baldwin piano is one that the most recent Empress Michiko had played on twice, so a lot of history with that piano as well. And there's my mom in that middle photo. It happened to be her birthday that week, and so the embassy had even prepared a birthday cake for her. It was lovely. And then a repeat trip to Lisbon. This is at the embassy's July 4th party that the ambassador invited me to. This was great fun. And then this was also part of that Lisbon trip. So the same festival and the embassy, they had me as a special guest, where I even got to meet and spend time with the Kronos Quartet, since they were the last ones to close out the season for that festival that year. And Sunny, the cellist, is actually a friend of mine from USC, so it was lovely to get to reconnect with her. And then I was delighted to see on my on the cover of this entertainment calendar from that region that they had placed me on the cover for the following season. So that concludes my presentation for now, and I just have to reiterate how lucky I have felt that I've gotten to do these trips, and that it really was my dreams coming true and even surpassing my dreams. So my hope is to continue to do more of these and to continue to inspire more people everywhere I go. So thank you again for listening, and hopefully now we'll have the breakout. Oh no, I think the Q&A. Sorry, I forgot. Oh, okay, wait, hold on. I think I need to exit this in order to see the questions. Oh, yikes, I'm not seeing the chat box.
Pauline, you can go ahead and stop share screen, and then you should be able to see it.
Got it, okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh, wow, I missed all these comments. Okay, let me see. Oh, how is the role of a cultural attaché different now from earlier in history? I believe that, so from my understanding, it seems that the role of a cultural attaché back when, let's say, the Kennedys were in office, it seemed that they were really being sent to different embassies as a very, very high-level official who would make a lot of the cultural connections between countries. And so I think my understanding is that now there's a lot more administrative work that goes on in that role. That's at least what I hear from my friends who have served as cultural affairs officers, where they often tell me that they did not expect that much of an extent of admin work, in addition to getting to actually represent the U.S. In these different countries. Let me see. Oh, I'm gonna try to go through all these comments later. I'm so happy to see everybody. Oh, on average, how long do I spend at each mission for these cultural diplomacy tours? Oh, okay, so it really depends. So in that Japan case, it was just, it happened to be that I was there just for a day. And so then the embassy and I made it work where we would pack in as many activities as I could in that one day with the hope that there will be follow-up trips. And then in Portugal and Ethiopia, those were slightly longer trips. And basically the way the scheduling works, it depends on a couple of factors, on my performing schedule and on the embassy's schedule on what they have coming up, and also venues. And yes, so those are some of the big factors. Let me see. Oh, how do I select the pieces to play and collaborate with local embassy staff to create the program that I perform? So I've mostly been given a carte blanche for preparing my programs. That was something that I had been very interested in as well leading up to my first one. I wanted to know if there were particular compositions or pieces by certain composers that the embassies would want me to program. But generally, they've given me the liberty to pick my program. I just always make sure to at least include one American composer, though. And I try to include a couple of fast pieces, slow pieces, just for some variety. And then from different eras, and a couple of composers from different countries, so that it's not, for example, an all Chopin program, as much as I love Chopin. Oh, how did I first become interested in music, and when did I first begin studying the piano? Oh, hello, Ambassador Morris. So I started playing piano when I was 5, which I think is quite average. It seems that most people who learn an instrument, I found, have started by the age of 5, and then they quit by the age of 12, unfortunately. So I was just very lucky that I had such phenomenal teachers who really continued to inspire me throughout my life, and still do. And I have been very fortunate in my performing career too, where I realize the power of performance and the power of music. Oh, Professor Van Teln, hello. During my trips, did I receive any surprising questions about American traditions? Do students in other countries have access to instruments, sheet music, and instructors? How can the U.S. help with this? Oh, so interesting timing for that question. So last week when I did this virtual program for U.S. Embassy Tokyo, a lot of the students were actually asking the embassy and me if it would be possible for us to form some sort of partnership where I could actually work with the students virtually over Zoom, where I could teach them piano, for example. Not all of them have access to instruments who were on this call, even though they were really interested in studying music in the United States. And so they were wondering what kinds of opportunities could be possible. So I'm certainly going to be continuing to reach out to the embassy to figure out what we can do, because the public affairs section in Addis has mentioned that they would like to do some more follow-up events as well. Oh gosh, wow, there's so many wonderful comments and questions. I hope I'll get to see all of these later. Ambassador Leonard, you are here. When Nigeria no longer has arrival quarantine requirements, I'll be welcome to visit there. Thank you. I can't wait. Let's see. How are things shaping up with cultural programming at the 2020/2021 World Expo in Dubai? Oh, so it seems that Expo 2020 is still going to happen, even though it's going to be put off by a year. And I'm certainly hoping that I'll be able to be in conversations with those who are planning that to see if I'll be able to have the honor of playing at the US Pavilion there. So we'll see. Let me see. Oh, Professor Henriksen, it's lovely to see you. So for those of you who don't know, Professor Henriksen was my thesis advisor at Fletcher and one of my lifelong role models. And it's so lovely to see you. Thank you for tuning in. Let me see. Oh, I hope I didn't miss any questions. I can't wait to see all the comments later. Olivia, does it look like I missed any questions in the meantime?
No, I think we have gone through everything in the chat box. If there are any last questions, please go ahead and ask them now, or else we'll segue to Erin Frankie, who will break us out into our breakout sessions.
Oh, I see one here. How do I compare my live programs versus online? Oh, so I'm very old school. I definitely prefer in person. And I think all of you who are on this call, who are in public diplomacy, know that. There's just nothing like being in person with who you're working with. So, or in my case, sometimes playing for. So I'm itching for this pandemic to be over so that we can all be back together and so that I can also get to meet these audience members and students in all these different countries again. I miss that so terribly. But I'm glad that at least in the meantime that there are virtual programs going on. So at least that has been happening.
Erin?
Okay, on that note, we are going to be breaking out. I want to just ask quickly, Olivia, Dr. Mueller, do we want to stick with 20? I believe we're a little over, do we still want to stick with 20 minutes? And just a reminder, thank you, Pauline, and there will be more time for questions after this. She's agreed to stick around if anybody is available to stick around.
Why don't we compromise on 17 minutes and see how that goes, and our tech host will guide us.
Awesome. Okay, so Olivia is going to be breaking us out to our breakout groups to have a conversation about public diplomacy that we've personally witnessed. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Pauline. Very fascinating.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask everybody to bring a mug that's meaningful to them. Which one is that, dear?
This is for Lisbon.
Beautiful.
And it's actually a special edition one because the ambassador just last year renamed the residence Casa Carlucci after Ambassador Frank Carlucci. And so this is the sketch of the ambassador's residence with the US flag.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Just as a quick aside, I used to go to a gym where Frank Carlucci would work out, and I got to speak with him several times over a couple of year period. He was a really wonderful guy.
Wonderful. I think we have a quorum and want to just echo Erin's thanks to Pauline for such a very special program. And I think the only solution is we probably have to have round two because it sparked so much good discussion. I'm going to quickly call on each of our reporters, thank our moderators, on each of our reporters to say, just give us one quick example of what your group discussed. And I know you'll have to shrink it down a little bit. Nicole, you were with Jim Kelman and his group. Nicole, please.
Sure. Yeah. So we had a lot of interesting stories in our group for sure. I will share a very quick one from Dino Catarini. He was talking about when he was in Burma in the 1970s. And they tried to get the government to accept Duke Ellington and his orchestra to come, and he was able to come, and they had 2 great evenings of successful programming. But it was really interesting and fascinating for the people of Burma to see him performing when Americans weren't allowed. There was a fun story about Duke Ellington and a Coca-Cola during his interview, but I'll have Dino share that. But we had a lot of really wonderful examples. One really quick one was Jim Kelman's in Tokyo, where Mrs. Fields came to launch her cookie brand in Japan. And she was told that she had to step down the sugar content to make them a little less sweet and more palatable to her audience. So there were so many great examples. We had a great conversation, but those were definitely 2 that stood out.
Thank you, Nicole. Sana, you were with Peter Kovac.
Yeah, so we also had a great and insightful, very diplomatically beautiful conversation relevant to a lot of the different exchange initiatives throughout the world. And one thing that was pointed out that I think resonated was the authenticity of exchange programs. And sometimes when we go in with objectives and missions, kind of making sure that it's still authentic in terms of exchange and cultural diplomacy and not just mission driven. So that was one point that stood out, I think. Yeah.
Excellent. Sana, thank you so much. That's a good reminder for everyone. Jonathan Wang, you were with Mark Rebstock.
Yes, I actually was briefly with Mark, but then he left our group for another one. I had instead the privilege to speak with Greta Morris and Dan Whitman. Okay. And I'd like to share a quick story from Dan. He mentioned that when he was serving in Mali, there was an American fine artist, graphic designer named Mary Spear, who came to showcase her paintings as part of an exhibit. And this was in the wake of the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center, and the PD officers were tasked with trying to improve the local majority Muslim country to adopt more favorable views of Americans and convince them that Americans weren't all out to go after the Muslims. And Dan Whitman said he found this exhibit to be the most effective in convincing local imams to really appreciate, first of all, art that was produced by women from Mali in a majority Muslim country that isn't often the most favorable or welcoming towards women artists. So that was really powerful.
Excellent. Jonathan, thanks so much. I want to move on. Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey, I do know you're a Rangel Fellow, dear. I
no worries.
put that in my head before, and I'm glad I have
it perfectly fine.
To apologize. Okay. You were with Marilyn, I believe.
Yes, ma'am. And so in our group, we also had a really insightful discussion. The example we ended up selecting was actually Marilyn's example. She spoke about an experience that she had coordinating a group of students to come to the US while she was working with World Learning as a part of the IVLP program. And they were able to bring the students from Africa to look at the US election process on Super Tuesday. And the group was able to go to Montgomery, Alabama. But while they were there, they also were there at the same time as the reenactment of the famous Edmund Pettus Bridge Walk in Selma, Alabama. And the students actually got a chance to participate in the walk along the bridge as a part of that wonderful example of citizen participation and civic engagement in America.
Super examples from your group. Thank you, Jeffrey and Marilyn. Danny, you were with Mike Schneider, Dr. Schneider? Yeah.
Yes.
It's wonderful. I see several of my former students here. This is great. Danny, go ahead, dear.
Yes. So as all the other groups have mentioned, we also had a wonderfully insightful conversation, especially about how music and cultural diplomacy can really open doors for conversations and just start these conversations. So some of the cultural diplomacy events that we talked about, Alan Hendrickson brought up an interesting project on architectural preservation that was between New York and Tokyo, I believe. And they brought in experts in architecture to talk about these projects. And Michael Schneider also mentioned, I forget which country this was, I apologize, but there was a poet, I think her name was Carolyn Kaiser, who came and gave a series of discussions and poetry readings. And as during one of these events, there was actually a folk band on the street, and they were able to interact together and have kind of a cultural exchange in that manner. And then Ambassador Mary Beth Leonard was also in our group. And of course, she invited Pauline to perform when she was the US ambassador to the African Union. And so that was obviously a great event that we just heard much about in this event today.
Well, we're honored to have Ambassador Leonard with us, and also Professor Hendrickson, who probably has affected at the Fletcher School over his 40-year career there, taught more of us diplomatic history than, and I just hope it's continuing. Olivia, have I missed anyone? Did Hella have a group?
She did. That would be Erin.
Erin.
Yeah, I can round us out. We had a good conversation. Sounds like everybody did. We discussed, and I'm just going to touch briefly on each point because it's pretty brief, and they were all really good. But Abby from Meridian was discussing cultural diplomacy in the sense of music as well, and talked about a program that Meridian does that sets up exchanges between American hip hop artists and hip hop artists from around the world to increase collaboration and just share experiences. And we all thought that was really interesting. Went into Haley Dale's interest in just generally musical events, whether they be more like what Pauline does or these sort of hip hop events that Meridian's been focusing on. And Brittany Link talked a little bit about the rise of culinary diplomacy and the increasing importance that field is having. And everybody loves food. Most people love to try new foods, and just the power of what a food says about a culture and the power of exchanging and sharing over food. And the last point I'll mention is something that I did as a Peace Corps volunteer, which was part of exchanging culture, which was a pumpkin carving contest around Halloween. And what I considered the success of combining, presentation in addition to something that all Chinese people are aware of through movies and television, but have never done themselves. And so actually holding a contest where you learn about the culture, but then actively engage and have something that you take away from it, I thought was generally a successful program. And so, we just had a good conversation about these different elements and how you can combine what's important to everybody: food, music, cultural traditions, to have successful events. And that's it for us.
Erin, thank you so much. I hope you'll all join me in 1 minute. I want to thank Pauline visually, but she will stay for about 10 more minutes. I want to thank each of you in the Zoom room for sharing your special experiences. I think we all share this passion for public diplomacy that Pauline exemplifies so well. So please join me in thanking Pauline. We need your claps here. Okay. Pauline, thank you. For those of you who need to slip away, this is your cue to leave the meeting. For those of you who want to visit for a few more minutes with Pauline, please stay on. Thank you so much from the Public Diplomacy Council. All best. Okay. Pauline, we're here with you. I don't know what you see in the chat box. Were there things that you wanted to go back to? And Olivia, have you had a chance to just look at it and maybe help Pauline identify it? Every now and then when I'm working on my tiny little laptop, which is all I have with me. I'm going like this. So if you all will help, that would be great.
Yes, I'm just quickly scrolling through to see if I missed anything.
Or somebody, if you have a question for Pauline, the old-fashioned way, just wave your hand and we'll recognize you. Kathy, so good to see you. Gosh. Peter, our moderator. Okay. Any questions in the room that you haven't written down? Erin?
I believe Brittany has her hand raised as well.
Brittany? Oh, sorry.
I'll follow you, Erin.
Okay. All right, cool.
Brittany. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go, Brittany, and then we'll pass it off. I think I'm curious, and maybe this is a slightly tougher question, but thinking about the events that you've done, have you run into situations where people question, why are we spending all this money for you to go around and play piano in really fancy places? Like, have you had conversations about justifying why a taxpayer would pay for these sorts of programs, and kind of how do you respond to that? How do you say, okay, this is the purpose and this is why we should be spending on these sorts of programs? I'm curious if you've run into that.
Thanks, Erin. I personally haven't, but I do know that a lot of the embassy staff run into that. So I think I might be lucky in that I'm shielded from that a bit in the capacity that I'm there. But when I'm meeting with audiences in different countries for these trips, I do try to at least always mention in the conversations the power of public diplomacy, and that it's the long-term goals that might not always be so immediately visible when achieved, because it takes time. But it's building the relationships and building brick by brick and laying the foundation. And that's what ultimately creates trust, I think. And that I hope is something that can be conveyed. And I hope that through my performances and events, and especially the talking with people part at these events, I hope will help get through at least.
Excellent. Brittany?
Well, just a few comments talking about culinary diplomacy. Pauline has a great Facebook page that posts and hosts all the unbelievably stunning, beautiful food creations she is making, in addition to her ballet and other spaces of cultural sharing that are even beyond her piano, which is an amazing medium in and of itself. And I don't know if this is the right platform, if you're comfortable talking a little bit more about, my question was about the World Expo, and have conversations gone any further? Do you feel like in the space where the US has a chance to showcase itself, that they are putting culture forward, that in the conversations you've had with the organizing folks, do you feel hopeful for the image that's going to be going out in 2021 of the US?
Thanks, Brittany. It's great to see you. I think it is a very hopeful image that the Expo team is putting out. I know that the State Department is partnering with Global Ties to select performers and speakers, chefs. They're selecting a wide array of Americans to send to Dubai. And I am in conversations of trying to push that forward. So hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully I'll have the chance to perform at the US Pavilion there. But yeah, it does seem that they're doing a lot of good outreach in order to show a very diverse group of Americans through I think it's about 7 months that they're going to be in Dubai. And I'm really glad to see that it is still happening, because I know that for some time there was still a question of whether the US would even have a pavilion in Dubai. But thankfully they were able to solidify that. So I'm in the process now.
Thank you for that extra info.
About a year ago, Brittany and I were in Dubai looking at the areas where it's all going to happen. Kathy, you had a question.
Yeah, first I want to congratulate Pauline on her career so far. It's looked really promising and just really enriching and terrific. We have a little bit in common because when I joined the Foreign Service many years ago with USIA, I'm retired now, but I had a master's in music and 10 years or so of experience in arts administration. So that I was coming from that background. And I guess I can't help but make the comment that, the tiny cultural affairs budget now within ECA, it's just a sliver of what they used to have when they had an entire Office of Arts America. And I was pretty disillusioned when that happened, in fact, when that decision was made. But I guess the thing I really wanted to ask you is that I got involved with the National Endowment for the Arts for quite a while as well, and I worked for them. And those of us who worked in cultural policy circles, both at the national level and at the international level, found ourselves wrestling with a certain question. And that was having to justify, that was the intrinsic value of the arts versus non-arts values. And we always found ourselves having to justify within the State Department or USIA environment, the non-arts side of the equation. We do art because it leads to something else. Citizen engagement or an entree to VIPs or whatever it happened to be. My question for you is, as an artist, does this bother you? Because I suspect your heart is in your music more than anything else. And the fact of the matter is, without the intrinsic value, you don't get these secondary values to begin with, because it's the intrinsic value, it's the experience of the music itself that provides these other things.
Thank you for that question. It's so lovely to have a fellow musician here. I think that because I've been fortunate to have had some training in at least learning why all of that is important collectively, I personally don't mind, because I think I can separate the two when necessary, and then think of it holistically also when necessary. I do find myself having to explain to a lot of my musician friends why it is important to also be cognizant of that side, and why it's also important. I think that ultimately, even though the arts are a really great way to connect people, if there are other goals that can be achieved through that, then I think it's still really beneficial in the long run. And even if that may mean taking some time away from just the pure music side, I think there are still great gains that can be made. I forgot to mention in my presentation that in Ethiopia, for example, that was the first time and place where I ever met someone who hadn't seen or heard a piano before. And so for that kind of experience, for that person, I hope will be inspiring and something that he will remember, and hopefully will also become more curious about music, the arts, cultural diplomacy, or what else the US is doing to bring this to people who might otherwise not have constant and easy access to it. So I hope that collectively all of this could help.
Before we go to the last two questions, I think Peter and Professor Hendrickson, I just want to say, Kathy, we're involved in advocacy. And I share your thought that we spend such a pittance on this when there is so much to be achieved if we would just increase the budget. If you want to work on that, we need your help. And with that, I will turn to Peter and Professor Hendrickson. There's another question. So will Peter go ahead, and then we'll wrap up with these three then.
I hate to go before Professor Hendrickson, who is really one of the great inspirations in my life.
For all of us. I know, oh, Alan.
But Pauline, thank you so much. Do you have a good example of how the impact of your engagement with a limited audience overseas was amplified by skillful media coverage arranged by the embassy.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So there has been a lot of media, or was a lot of media coverage for my visits in Ethiopia and in Portugal. And I found that through the radio interviews and some newspaper articles that a lot of people, first of all, found out about the events and what the embassy was having me do. And then the media also talked a lot about why this was important, which is the goal. And they did quite a few write-ups before and also after events, which I really appreciated because luckily there was a good turnout for all the events and good feedback from the attendees, both at concerts and at the lectures/workshops. So the media did cover that. And I think the media has ended up actually helping promote this as well. I used to personally think that a lot of times the media would be very skeptical against what would be put forward by the government, but I'm really glad to see that actually the opposite has been the case, at least from the experiences that I've had so far.
Super. Professor Hendrickson?
Yes, Pauline, you mentioned how you have enjoyed engendering curiosity, in classical music on the part of particularly young people. What is so noteworthy about you, and it always has been, is your own curiosity. And I think that is one of the greatest powers of good diplomacy, to be genuinely interested and open in what you're seeing in all fields. I mean, not just music. You're not just performing. You're not just showing something, demonstrating something. You're learning as well, but in a way that manifests a genuine responsiveness to what it is around you. And I'm sure everyone feels that. This is a wonderful demonstration of diplomacy, and for you, it comes naturally.
Excellent point, Alan. That is so absolutely right on target. Did we have one other question? If you could please, the lady in the square over here, if you could please introduce yourself quickly and a quick question.
Hi, so my name is Stephanie. It's nice to virtually meet you, Pauline. Thank you so much. I'm a fellow Fletcher graduate. I just graduated from Fletcher. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role your experience and time at Fletcher specifically has influenced, shaped, and helped your career trajectory.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yes, Pauline, for the last word here.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so happy to see a fellow Fletcher grad. And by far the most influential experiences for me at Fletcher have been all my times with Professor Henriksen. So it really means so much to me to hear you say those very kind words. And this relates to what you were saying too, as well, Professor Henriksen, about my curiosity. I think a lot of it became even further developed because of my classes with you, where I learned what else to be curious about and to explore even more deeply in the areas that I'm so interested in. But yes, so my time at Fletcher, those were two of the best years of my life. I was surrounded by some students who were already diplomat practitioners who were being sent to Fletcher by their country's governments for some further training and then an education. And then I was also surrounded by a lot of students who were aspiring to become diplomats and to go into the field. And for me, it really depends on, or I should put it this way, that I am inspired by those who are around me who have a really strong passion to pursue something. It could be anything, but if they're passionate about what it is that they do, and if they live and breathe it, then that to me is so fulfilling to be around, because I think that makes me a better person, hopefully in both my personal life and professional life. And I hope to pay that forward as well. So it's really the people at Fletcher who I remember most fondly, because it's the people who created all those experiences for me, and 2 of the best years of my life.
I can say that about my years at Fletcher too. I want to thank all of you for your being members of the Public Diplomacy Council, being passionate about this field. And Pauline, thank you for being a superb example to all of us. And thanks to everyone here. All best. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care.